JavaScript is not my strength, and I often feel overwhelmed with the number of frameworks out there. HTMX itself is a JavaScript library, but you only have to include that in your code, and then it enhances HTML with attributes for making AJAX requests and dynamically updating parts of a web page, just like any other attribute of HTML like href, etc. We will see how to use it with Spring Boot and Thymeleaf. In this video, we will first briefly understand HTMX and the mechanism behind it. Then, going step by step, we will build a simple Spring Boot MVC app using Thymeleaf to display user info. Next, we will add functionality to the web page to show the activities for that user, making a GET request to an endpoint using HTMX. Next, we will further add functionality to that web page to make a POST call using HTMX to add more activities. So, this should give you a good idea of the usage of HTMX and demonstrate its power and simplicity. Let's first understand HTMX with an example. So let's say we have a web page which shows the customer's information. On that web page, we have a button to load up orders for that customer. When the button is clicked, it invokes the /orders endpoint using HTMX. The /orders endpoint will return the HTML fragment which represents the order info. So, unlike the REST endpoints which normally return JSON response, the endpoint will need to return HTML for it to work with HTMX. Now, in the case of Spring Boot and Thymeleaf, we can return Thymeleaf fragments. This HTML fragment is then loaded in a div on the page. So only the relevant portion of the page is refreshed versus the entire page, so the network data returned is optimized. HTMX is like an extension to the HTML attributes. So looking behind the scenes, the button will have an HTMX attribute hx-get, which refers to the endpoint to call here /orders. The hx-target specifies which DOM element would get loaded with the returned HTML, here the target div. The hx-swap would specify what would get swapped. Here we are saying outer HTML. So it is very easy and intuitive, and unlike AJAX calls, it does not involve complex JavaScript coding. Let's now see a demo which should make the concepts even more clear. First, let's go to start.spring.io, choose Maven as the build tool. Let's name the artifact as HTMX, add dependency for web, then for Thymeleaf, and then for HTMX. Let's click Generate and save the zip file. Expand it, and here is the project. Let me open IntelliJ, click Open, point to the pom.xml file, open as project, trust project. Here is the POM file with the Thymeleaf, web, and HTMX dependencies. Let's go to Java, right-click, create a new package, call it controller, then right-click, new class, call it HTMX controller. Mark it as a controller, create a request mapping for root, public string get user, which takes in the model object, to the model adds attribute greeting as users, another attribute name as John Doe, and age as 25. In the real world application, you would get this from a database, etc. However, I want to keep it simple for the demo. And then it will return the Thymeleaf template user view. Let's create it next. Thymeleaf expects the templates under source main resources templates folder. Let's create a file and name it userview.html. Let me paste a few lines here. We are including the Thymeleaf namespace here, a couple of meta settings. This is the script tag which contains the CDN for HTMX script, another link for Bootstrap style sheet. Let's create the body tag. Inside a div with ID users, class container. Inside, put the h1 tag, inside which, using th:\text, refer to the heading model attribute using the $curly bracket syntax. Then create a table with T head, inside which a header row with two columns, name and age, and then inside T body using TR, a row for values. So the first TD using th:\text referring to the name model attribute, and then the age model attribute. I want to keep the HTML page simplistic, so let me just create a style element for the table, TD with border as 1 pixel, solid black and padding 5 pixels. I do not want to introduce fancy styling here to keep the focus on the basic elements and their interactions. Oh, here I need to call it heading, as that is how we are referencing it in the template. Let's go to the main class and run the application. It starts at port 8080. Let's go to the browser and type localhost 8080, and we see our page. So the model, Thymeleaf view, and controller layers are working fine. Now let's start adding HTMX. Let me stop the app, right click on the package, create new package, call it model, right click, create a new class, call it activity. Let's add two new variables, private string activity and status. Right click, generate getters and setters, click OK. Now let's go to the user view, add a break and then a div with ID activities loader. Let's put in a button with class button primary, type button. Now let's introduce HTMX, so hx-get equal to /activities. This will make the ajax get call to /activities endpoint, which we have not created yet. hx-target, using this attribute we can tell where the return response should go. Let's say to a div indicated by # activities container. Using hx-swap, we can tell what to swap. Here let's say outer HTML. So HTMX provides an extension to HTML attributes, hx-get, hx-target, etc. Just like we use other HTML attributes like href, etc. The only thing is that the hx-get, hx-post, etc. calls should return an HTML response and not a JSON response. So our controller endpoints should return HTML, and we are returning Thymeleaf views which are HTML. Label this button as load activities. Give a line break and create the target div activities container where the returned HTML from HTMX call will be loaded. We now need to create the controller endpoint /activities. So in our controller class, create a request mapping for /activities. The method takes in the model object. To this, let's add attribute heading activities. Let's initialize a new activity. To this, set activity as workout, set status as not done, as it's very often the case with me. Next, let's create a list of activity, call activity list as a new array list, and then to this list add our activity and add it to the model as activities. Finally, return the Thymeleaf fragment common : activities. A Thymeleaf fragment is, as its name suggests, an HTML fragment which can be included in a web page. This works well with the HTMX or AJAX calls, as it only gets a relevant piece of page versus loading the entire page. If you want to learn more about the Thymeleaf fragments, please watch my video, Spring Boot, putting Thymeleaf fragments like header, footer across multiple Thymeleaf pages. Alright, let's create this fragment next. So right click on templates, create a new file, call it common.html. Give the HTML body tags. Inside, create the div with ID as activities. Using th-fragment, name it as activities. Since this will be embedded in the parent HTML, the th tag will be resolved there. Inside, using h1 and then span, refer to the model heading attribute using th:\text. Next, again, let's create a table with t-head containing of activity and status columns. And under t-body, have the tr tag. We're using th:\each activity : $curly braces activities. Let's loop over the activity list, add it to the model attribute, and get the activity.activity and activity.status variables. Oh, I forgot to add the .activity here. So now our controller will return the Thymeleaf fragment activities inside the common.html file. Let's see it in action. Go to our main class and start the application. Going back to the browser, enter localhost 8080, our page comes up now with the Load Activities button. Let me open up the developer console, open the Network tab, refresh the page, click the Load Activities button, and we see here the activities fragment being returned. If you notice, there was no page refresh. Looking at the activities fragment, in the response, we see just the fragment was returned. So hx-get is working fine, and it makes our page lean and interactive. Now let's demonstrate hx-post to post form data. Let's say we want to add activities. So going to our common.html file, let me first stop the app. Now let's add a break and then a div with id add. Inside, let's create a form element with hx-post referencing to the endpoint add, which we will create next. hx-target would be the activities div, as you want that after adding the activity, it should reload the content in the activities div. hx-swap as outer HTML. Now let me add a label for new activity and then an input box for id new activity. Similarly, a label and input text box for status. Add the submit button with label add. Now in the controller class, add the request mapping for /add. The method inside will take in input parameters for new activity and status, which the form will submit, as well as the model object. To the model, we add the heading attribute, create a new activity, add the activity as new activity, status as the past status, add it to the activity list, add to the model, and again return the Thymeleaf fragment common : activities, which will now, along with the activity list, also have the form to add the new activity and status. Let's see it in action. Start the app, go to the browser, refresh the page. Now click Load Activities, and here we see the activities fragment, which now contains the form also. Let's add a new activity, reading status done, and click Add. At this point, the hx-post calls a /add endpoint. The refreshed activities fragment is returned with a new activity added to the list along with the form. So this is how HTMX allows us to extend the HTML attributes and make AJAX calls and make our form interactive without having to code complex JavaScript for that. Thanks for watching.